Let's be honest, modern medicine is broken. Patients are dismissed, doctors are exhausted, and mental health care is decades behind. So it's time to disrupt the status quo, to challenge a system that fragments care, dehumanizes patients, and burns out clinicians. I'm Dr. Georgine Nanos, and this is The Kind Revolution, a podcast about breaking old paradigms, rebuilding medicine with compassion and science, and reimagining what healthcare can be when we finally get it right. Because change is here, and it's starting with us. Welcome to the revolution. All right. Welcome back to the Kind Revolution podcast, where we have honest conversations about mental health, healing, and what it really takes to care for people who carry the heaviest burdens. Today's guest is someone whose work has quite literally been on the front lines of psychological trauma and suicide prevention. I'm so honored to have Dr. Shauna "Doc" Springer, who is a licensed psychologist, a Harvard graduate, an award-winning Military Times podcast host, and one of the world's leading experts in trauma recovery and warrior wellness. She has spent over 2 decades advising military warfighters and first responders, and she's not afraid to challenge the systems that are failing them. Her newest book, Fallout, is a bold re-examination of long-held beliefs about suicide prevention and mental health in warrior communities, and it asks a very powerful question. Do we have the courage to change what is not working? Doc Springer, welcome to the Kind Revolution. I'm so honored to have you here today.
Thank you, Dr. Nanos.
So you've worked at the extremes of trauma for now over 2 decades. What first drew you into this work with military members and first responders?
It was a kind of recognition, I think, that people with a warrior spirit feel like home for me. It just felt right. Sometimes you're going down the path and, there's no intention. I can't claim any credit for figuring out that I wanted to do this. Just discerning that when I started working with my first veteran patients was actually back in my residency, my psych residency, many years ago, over 20 years ago. And I did a rotation in the Gainesville VA, and it just felt different. And I've always supported a range of people, but putting veterans and protectors and first responders at the center of my purpose has really been a theme across the arc of my career.
And what did you see early on, maybe in those early days, that made you realize that conventional approaches weren't enough?
I think it's been a growing understanding, to be honest. I don't think I saw early on. I'm committed to brutal honesty here. So let me just say that for years, I owned that I was somebody with the best of intentions that was trained to do certain therapies, protocols, approaches that were the best of what we knew. And I was told the gold standard for care. So I got trained in all kinds of treatment approaches from different entities, the VA, the DoD. My goal isn't to be critical of any particular system, just to say that I was part of that system and with the best of intentions did things that I wouldn't do now, because I think it's natural with every kind of field that we need to continue to evolve and really develop better approaches, more refined precision approaches. As we learn more, we do better.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think sometimes it takes years of us being entrenched in the institutions that are sort of the norm, and until we can kind of see a different way. So I get that. For our listeners who might not be familiar, what makes warrior and first responder communities culturally unique when it comes to mental health?
So many things. I just did a whole training on working with veterans and first responders for an organization that has an inpatient program really geared towards substance abuse called Fortitude Recovery. They're up here in Northern California. And I developed a 100-question assessment of cultural alignment. I don't call it cultural competence because I don't think we ever get totally competent. I think that suggests there's this standard and you hit it. I'm always still learning. I think that's what we need to be doing, is always learning. But cultural alignment really looks at your understanding of the language, which is really important. I mean, if you drop a stitch in therapy because you don't know what they're talking about, that affects your rapport. So if you go into any other culture, if you were to go and say, I want to go and embed with a tribe in Costa Rica or something like that, you would have to learn the culture and the language. Yet so many times when people say, I want to work with public safety or with veterans, there's kind of this sense that, well, you can just migrate your generalist training and now support them. It's very much not true. They will be able to tell in a nanosecond whether you really have done the work and spent the time or have the willingness to meet them where they're at. And so it's culture, it's ethos, it's language, it's clinical decision making based on those things. And that's part of what I'm developing is training up people to really become the docs of tomorrow.
I love that. And it's so true. There's so much complexity and so many layers to these communities that I think the general public we don't see often. I don't know if yeah, very much of it is hidden beneath the surface. Is the
And you know warriors too, so you know that. So I'll give a
yeah,
concrete example. So there's artwork on the wall behind me that was created by a very talented marine artist named Mike Reynolds, and he's a artist for the Marine Corps, and he did these pieces behind me. If I'm meeting with warriors, this is what they're going to see behind me. If I'm meeting with civilians, I might pan out a little bit and show a Harvard degree, but I'm not going to show that to a warrior on the first, few sessions, or like it's just not relevant to how they build trust. So it's
yeah,
so inverse, for civilian patients, they want to know that I went to Harvard. They want to know that I have this PhD degree. That is how
right,
you build trust with certain business leaders and civilians, certain kind of clients that I have. It's the opposite. In fact, if I showed that and showed up with that kind of expertise in a session with warriors, it communicates I've been in school for a really long time. I've been in the ivory tower. And what do I know about the conditions of combat or warfare or training or being a warrior or traveling and living in different countries? It's kind of going to erode or extend
yeah,
the gap in trust before I even begin to build it. So it's
yeah.
inverse in a very interesting way.
It's so true. Let's talk about your new book, Fallout. What
Yeah,
inspired you
I'm
to
excited.
write it?
I am excited and scared, Georgine, in equal measure. I'm sort of bracing for impact. So I just got a galley copy. Oops, as I drop everything on my desk. This is a galley copy. It has like this band across that says not for resale. So the eventual one won't have that sort of weird band across the front. But it's a work based on years in the trenches with warriors and public safety professionals around realizing there's all these ways of thinking that have that have infiltrated themselves so deeply into our collective thought that we're not even aware of it. And they are increasing risk and they are doing the opposite of what they intend to do. And so I'm really tackling what isn't working in the warrior wellness space, suicide prevention space, whatever we want to call it. I don't even talk in those terms anymore. I talk about mental warfare and how that's part of the path of becoming a protector and defender. And we spend all of this time training people for physical warfare and no time training them to really understand and get traction with mental warfare. And then we give them all of these approaches that are ultimately based on very civilian models that were never designed for them, that are full of assumptions that don't land, that increase the deficit in trust, and that put them at greater risk. And so that's what I'm tackling is 10 common beliefs that are actually taking us in the wrong direction for many decades.
So let's look at those. Can you break them down for me?
I'll give you a concrete example. So one of the ways that a lot of funding and energy has really been spent in the last couple of decades is with a bunch of suicide prevention awareness campaigns. It's what gets funded is these big, sort of like social media and public awareness campaigns. And when I meet with veterans and first responders, they tell me that it makes them feel like suicide is a runaway train that can't be stopped. It makes them feel helpless, which directly increases risk. It makes them feel like they're in a fishbowl and they're being viewed and pitied by outsiders. It makes them feel like that's more for fundraising purposes than for actually helping them. And it ultimately makes their grief so much harder to bear because many of them are suicide loss survivors. Even though they don't see themselves that way, they have lost people they would take a bullet for. And so all these prevention awareness campaigns just increase the weight of their cumulative grief. So for all of those reasons, and probably more that I'm not remembering right now, what we do out of the best of intentions can backfire and take us all in the wrong direction. And I've just seen this happen over and over, not just with suicide prevention awareness campaigns, but with so many other areas, even initiatives very well intentioned about, let's totally stamp out suicide. zero suicide. With the best of intentions, respectfully, that's not possible. And if we think that we have perfect control over any human's behavior or decisions, then that implies that we have something we don't. First of all, that's a delusion, but it's also inferring that somebody screwed up when somebody dies by suicide. And I know that so many times people have had every resource and people that love them and are watching over them and monitoring them and supporting them. And sometimes they still die by their own hand. So that mentality that every suicide can be prevented, that's not correct either. So I'm trying to walk a line. Really, it's just trying to be truthful, trying to be very bold and truthful and present a credible approach based on years of work with warriors. And the book ends in ultimately, it's not just breaking down all these beliefs and presenting some alternative truths, but it's also presenting a vision. So the last 3 chapters are a 3-part vision for what I think they need and how the pieces of that work together. Part of it is all the biological stuff that's happening that you're so well familiar with, some of that innovation around biological treatments. There's a whole world of things beyond what I was trained in that I've now learned about, and I'm always continuously learning, that can really help heal people and heal injuries so that they don't have to feel like they're broken and they have this life sentence of post-traumatic stress disorder. That is no longer true. In many cases, what's injured can be healed. So it's, kind of that's an overview of some of the things.
Yeah. What, I think that's such an interesting point that I hadn't heard of before of some of these campaigns and all of these well-intentioned efforts really, causing greater risk. What should we be doing differently as a society, as a culture? Where can we make some impactful changes, do you feel?
Sometimes I think most of the funding in wellness and suicide prevention starts with a question of people that are pretty well resourced and educated, asking themselves, what can I offer? As in, what skills do I have to bring to this problem? And then designing interventions from there. And AI and all of these applications and countless companies that are bringing out AI solutions can be part of that problem. Now, AI can be done well and technology
Right.
can be used in service of human connection, but when it replaces human connection, we're going in the wrong direction. And so I think instead of kind of starting as a general philosophical framework from what am I good at? What can I offer? Like, what did I
Right.
learn in grad school and how do I become helpful for these poor people that are suffering? We start with, let's understand who they are, what motivates them, their inner psychology, the values that they hold sacred, and then let's design something based on human connection, using technology to facilitate that, that meets the need based on what they tell us is the need. And that's what I've had years of experience listening to. And so all of my work comes out of that framework of here's what warriors and protectors and defenders are telling me that they need.
Yeah. Just changing the lens from your own personal lens that as a provider you're imposing rather, and looking at it from the warriors. So what are some of the concrete treatments and approaches that you see are actually working when they are culturally aligned?
Well, let's take moral injury for example. Moral injury, something that needs to be much better understood. It's not the same thing as post-traumatic stress injury. It's a different thing. And because it is a different thing, that's more about shame and belonging and sort of violation of one's warrior code, one's moral code. The best intervention is often when somebody like me or somebody qualified, including sometimes very well equipped and trained peer support specialists, can be great with this, facilitates a particular group intervention because the group is what they need with moral injury. Shame is a community based, connection based emotion. And so the healing for that comes most powerfully from the group that says, no, you are with us, you belong to us. The group has the moral authority to heal people, in other words. A lot of the treatments for moral injury, again, have come out of this kind of individualistic civilian treatment provider, in a conventional way. What cognitive behavioral skills can I use to help this injured veteran to heal? It's the wrong approach and it's downright offensive to them and violating of their sacred values in many cases. Like I've seen things like that seem very intuitive to some providers. Like if something happened in a training, setting or in a combat theater, it was in violation of a warrior core values. I have seen clinicians with the best of intention give sheets where the veteran is supposed to like go through and check off the things that were difficult or challenging about that environment. Like I was cold, I was hungry, hadn't had any contact with my family, whatever it is. All of that is beside the point. Like they signed up to do hard things. That's their spirit. And there's no way anybody's going to convince them that it's okay because of these extenuating circumstances. So when they say, I violated my warrior code, you start with, okay, you violated your warrior code. Let's talk about that. How did that work for you? How did it impact you? How do you go back and reclaim your moral core? That's a different conversation than trying to like explain it away or forgive it when you don't have the
Right.
moral authority to do that.
Yeah. Can you define moral injury for our audience who may not know
Yeah,
exactly what that means?
sure. Let me define it in contrast to post-traumatic stress because a lot of people lump
Yes,
those
that's
two things
exactly what I was going to
together.
ask you to do. Yes.
Yeah. So post-traumatic stress injury is an anxiety disorder, and it's really about whether the world is a safe place, whether I can be safe in the world, and whether other people can be trusted. So those are the questions that are really people are asking. Is it safe? Are other people safe and trustworthy? Moral injury is more, it actually cuts deeper. It's more related to the self and a sense of belonging or shame. So it's the sense of being somehow morally contaminated by virtue of maybe something you did, but not always. It could be just a situation can create a sense of shame, a misalignment with your moral code or what I would call the warrior code. And you kind of carry this shame and it results in a feeling of maybe I'm not like other people. Maybe I don't belong. Maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I'm the, weak link, the monster, whatever it is. Moral injury is much more related to suicidal ideation than post-traumatic stress. So this is another example of like so much funding has gone into it's PTSD that causes people to die by suicide. Sometimes it does, but the more dangerous injury is even more invisible than post-traumatic stress. It's not a diagnosis, and it's something that very few people really, truly, deeply understand. So I think in summary, moral injury is about shame and belonging and identity, cuts very deep. And post-traumatic stress is about safety, anxiety, and sort of like whether you can trust other people and the world around you. Does that land?
Yeah, no, that's a perfect explanation. Thank you. So this kind of touches on my next question, which is that one of the things that you talk about in your book is that suicidal people don't always know that they're at risk. And I think that's, what you just said about moral injury being the more subtle and more insidious issue is kind of tied to that.
Yeah, insidious is a good word. And because it's shame-based, people tend to like really just compartmentalize that. And they
So what
don't tend to talk about it with other people, which would help them to begin to heal.
What are some warning signs that may be invisible even to the person struggling, and how can, you know, what can their immediate family members and colleagues help them? How can they help them?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of them, right? Sometimes people's eyes change in the sense of sometimes when people are really at the end of the tunnel with their voice of despair, if we want to kind of be metaphorical about it, they will not make eye contact with you, or their eyes just look empty, hollowed out, disconnected, almost like there's no hope there sometimes. So noticing that can be a cue that a person themselves would never really notice. So you could have a guy or gal that's like operational, like really performing as a firefighter or a police officer or a military service member, and they're sort of dying inside and they don't even see it. So in my previous book, Warrior, I wrote about the boy of Sparta who rescued this fox or rescued or took this fox off the side of the road and stuck him inside of his coat, went to his war exercises for the day. And he was in a classroom and the fox started eating his stomach. And he didn't complain because he was a boy of Sparta and they were very stoic. That's kind of where we get the word Spartan is from their culture of stoicism. And then at a certain point, the fox had eaten enough of his abdomen that he just, without a word of complaint, dropped over dead. That is what is happening in some, not all, but some of the cases of losing protectors and defenders is it gets really bad and they're not coding it as a problem until they're really in a state of crisis pretty far down the tunnel of despair. And so, looking at their eyes and actually, now that you mention it, I think one of the cues has always been looking at their partners because their partners tend to be a little bit less trained in compartmentalization. So if stuff at home is not good, the partners are a little bit less able to conceal that. So if a partner is like withdrawn or they feel off or they feel different, it might be because they're just not as like trained in masking it. And what's
Hmm.
happening behind closed doors is often a private nightmare for people when someone's really battling the voice of their demons and they
Yeah.
might be totally operational, but at home it's a different story and loved ones are really seeing, a very different situation.
What are in those situations when their loved ones are noticing these these behavioral changes, what should they do? Like what are some concrete steps that they can take?
Yeah. I mean, people often are very alone. Loved ones are very often alone. And the first thing is to recognize, at what point does your desire for loyalty and to not hurt your spouse's career, what time does that need to get outweighed by basic safety for the person who's suffering, for your family? And then thinking about when that point is arrived, who is trustworthy? And this is really where this is part of the book that's so important is like, we need to build structure and support that's truly safe. We can't keep saying it takes the strength of a warrior to get help. It's not about a deficit in strength, it's about a deficit in safety. So they have to know that when they reach out, the system will respond, the people will respond, and they don't always know that, and they're not wrong because the system isn't
Yeah.
always responding the way it should. And so one of the things that I'm building where I'm working with public safety departments is really a different model. And I'll give you an example. So I have a sheriff who says, take care of my people. Don't tell me who you talk to or what you talk with them about. Just tell me how many hours you worked, and that's how I get paid for that. So obviously based on trust and based on, my years of work and knowing that I'm going to be trustworthy with this arrangement. And also that I can now create a space that's not clinical, but that's consultative and link this person, be a bridge to care with docs on the ground if that's what they need. A lot of times, what people need to talk to me about is a health problem, they're grieving, a loss, they lost somebody to suicide. These are not clinical diagnoses. I don't need to
Yeah.
see somebody clinically or write a chart on those things. And so I can do a little process of no risk discernment and really do a culturally aligned conversation with them about what do they need? What are they struggling with? And then kind of see what they need. And sometimes in really innovative, like I have some of these contracts with sheriffs who say, okay, work with the peer team. And then I'm in there with the peer team and they can bring me in. And if somebody's not doing well, we can together intervene and say, before this becomes an administrative problem, let's just get you the help you need. Let's just like send you to a trusted program and put you on FMLA and everybody here has your back. And we're going to like do this together, no judgment. Everybody hits this wall from time to time. It's part of the call is dealing with mental warfare. How could it be otherwise? So
Yeah.
we are currently working with people in departments to get them the care they need in a safe way. So that's what I'm trying to do to create another pathway to healing that doesn't require people to have fear of professional consequences or that everything's going to, be documented and sent up to their leadership or they won't do it.
I know. I think that's so critically important for our leaders, our first responder leaders and military leaders who may be listening. What is one immediate shift that you could recommend? What are conversations that need to start today to start moving the needle in the right direction?
Warriors are not just people that go to combat for me. All of our protectors and defenders have a warrior spirit. To me, based on my work and writing, a warrior is someone who does what others can't or won't do in the service of values they hold sacred. So they have a warrior code. They're built different. They're wired for purpose. There's all these differences, right? One of the measures I developed was the measure of the warrior spirit. So sometimes I work with clients and give them that, and it's eye-opening for them to go, oh, my people are really built different, and I'm not leading a group of employees here. I'm leading a tribe of people that are bound by a code of honor, that have standards, that have their unique risks and Achilles heels. And so I would say, let people like me do what I do. You're not supposed to know about mental warfare. You didn't spend years in the trenches.
Right.
Let me come in there and just advise you on people that you're leading have certain risk factors and unique vulnerabilities, even the strongest of them, and how you lead them in a way that maintains trust with them is so important. There's so many make or break moments. Like one of the things I developed for a client that's a lot of clients are now asking for is 10 ways that good leaders unintentionally hurt their people during critical incidences. They don't mean to, they just don't know. And so being silent is a way you can really hurt your people. There's no neutral. When somebody's really struggling, your silence can be perceived as administrative betrayal. And
Yeah.
unless you get the advising to help you know what you can safely say to be most supportive of this tribe you're leading, you might screw it up, So it's let in outsiders like me that are, I grant, not like a very expected source of wisdom, but I've worked with this population for so long that I can share insights and strategies that are based on what I know they need. And then the other thing would be to really lead from the front and start to communicate early on and often. Mental warfare is part of the path. It's part of the profession, and we all hit the wall sometimes, and you can't see disturbing things and not have disturbing thoughts. And so having the thoughts is normal. We all have them. Certain calls are really tough and messed up, and we're going to just acknowledge that honestly. And when leaders do that and sort of lead from the front, it creates space for other people to do that as well and kind of talk about the messed up stuff they see. And so we can do more than just joke around and laugh it off, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not sufficient. Gallows humor, dark humor, not sufficient for dealing with the human impact of the kind of trauma that first responders and warriors see.
Yeah, I think that point is so important to set that expectation from the beginning and to normalize that it is part of the journey and not to, you know, not to make it not to make it feel like it's some sort of outlier and
Yeah.
punitive in any way. So much of what you said is so powerful. What can all of us take away about trauma and resilience and how to support people in high stress roles? I think so much of it applies to other aspects of our society and other people in our worlds.
Yeah, I mean, even to broaden that out, I don't actually believe resilience is the right target anymore. It's one of the chapters in the book about why resilience and all of this kind of focus on resilience is the wrong target. We're all resilient until we're not. And being called out as resilient is more likely to push you away from care because now you've created this identity based on I'm so resilient that when you struggle, it makes it harder to get the kind of support that can take you through it. So I have been developing with colleagues of mine at Magnus One, this theory of elasticity of identity, elasticity in relationships in your physical system. So elasticity is flexibility and range of motion in your nervous system, identity, and relationships. That's how I've defined it for many years. It's a neutral term that's non-stigmatizing, and I've developed a lot of assessment measures that look at things like allostatic load, like wear and tear on the body, non-stigmatized things that are better early warning indicators of when people are really struggling. So one of the analogies I've been thinking about is, we've had this sort of look for the signs of risk, look for the needle in a haystack. There's 50 needles. There's no needle in a haystack. I mean, you're all needles. What I
Right.
think is more true is people that are very resilient by nature are going to be lots of frogs in a pot boiling all the time. And in this cauldron, you've got 50 frogs. And it's discerning between when somebody needs to cool off for a while and get some help or if they can keep cooking. because it's a cauldron. You're in the cauldron. So like you're going to have the impact, and it's up to leaders to bring in a whole range of new insights and support so they can discern who needs what to have a sustainable career and do it with a sense of dignity and without bringing any shame to the process of needing to address mental warfare. It's part of the path.
Yeah.
Does that analogy work? I mean, it's kind of a new
No,
one
I
for
think
me.
it's
So I'm kinda
great.
like, it's a
I liked
little
it.
weird, but like
No,
you have
it
all these
makes
thoughts.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, you stay yeah, exactly. So, for someone who might be listening who's struggling right now, what would you want them to hear?
You're not broken. Feeling that you're broken doesn't mean you are broken. There's a whole world of innovative things that are now available well beyond the traditional, medication and therapy approach that's been used for decades. We've been kind of stagnant with that, actually. There's a lot of new biological treatments that are powerful when used in combination with culturally aligned support.
Yeah, so true. We're gonna do a little rapid fire, a few rapid fire questions here,
Okay.
but they'll be easy for you.
Okay.
What's the belief about mental health that that you've completely changed your mind about?
That medication and therapy is the gold standard.
I agree with that. I agree that I've changed my mind on that too. What's the most misunderstood trait of high performers and war?
That they need to become more resilient. They're already resilient. It's so
Yeah,
insulting. I think they're
yeah.
tired of resilience training, especially from outsiders. I would never come
Mhm.
in and do a training on how to be more resilient. I mean, that's just offensive before you've even left the gate. They're already our strongest and bravest. So when they're dying by suicide, we ought to be asking, what is it about our structure and support that isn't allowing them to heal, rather than what is it about them that's causing them to be at risk? That resilience is really what we should focus on, and that when they die by suicide, it's because they were somehow lacking in resilience. The question we ought to be asking is, how do we need to make our structures and supports better and safer for them to get the support they need to have sustainable peak performance across the arc of their career? That's a different question than what is it about them that's broken or wrong, and how can we
Yeah,
make them more resilient? Wrong question to begin with.
yeah, I totally agree. What is one word that defines courage?
Courage is different from bravery. It's really speaking from the heart. That is the essence of the warrior spirit. But there's a lot of people that are very brave and haven't yet exercised their courage as much as they could. And so, one word, I don't know. That's hard. One word. I mean, it's heart driven,
Yeah, I like that.
honest.
I like honest and heart driven. That's good. Any final thoughts? Anything else you want to share that I haven't asked you?
Not that I can think of. Well, okay.
Okay.
Well, if it's okay, um, what I've learned about how Amazon works is that when you are publishing your own work, the only way that they will let you do any pre-orders is if you do ebook pre-orders, and individual orders are what makes work visible. So my request, if anybody is willing to support my work, is spend 5 minutes and $3.99 and just pre-order an ebook. That's the best way, and then
Yes.
get all of your
I
friends to
did
do the
it.
same.
I did it. I got mine. I'm
Thank
so
you.
excited. Yes.
Thank
I
you.
completely support that. Doc Springer, this conversation has been so courageous and deeply necessary. Thank you so much for your willingness to come on here and talk about some of these uncomfortable truths that we have in the service of protecting the people who protect us. So thank you. And for those listening, you can learn more about Doc Springer's work at Thin Line Advisory and find her new book, Fallout, like we were just saying, on Amazon, wherever books are sold. And we'll link everything in the show notes, including her Instagram and LinkedIn. And if today's episode resonated with you or you think someone you love might benefit from it, please share it, and especially with someone in a leadership role or someone who works in the military or first responder communities. This is exactly what the Kind Revolution is about. It's replacing surface level awareness with real understanding, real alignment, and real healing. So until next time, stay kind, stay courageous, and take care of each other. And thank you again. Love this.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining the Kind Revolution. If this gave you something real, hope, perspective, or a fresh way to think about health, please share it, subscribe, and pass it on. Medicine won't change on its own, but together we can reimagine it and build something smarter, kinder, and create a system that truly heals. This is the Kind Revolution with Dr. Nanos, where science meets compassion and the future of medicine gets brighter one conversation at a time. Thanks for joining the revolution.